You'll recognize these verses from Shantideva's chapter 7 on joyous effort. He says, I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as how shall I ever awaken? Anybody ever had that thought? Yes. For the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. If they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. And so it implies that even these lowly beings, flies, mosquitoes, bees, and so forth, even they can become Buddha. And so why would I entertain such a despondent thought? Because, as the Buddha also said, we all have the nature, we all have the Buddha nature, the potential to become fully awakened. So I'm fond of bees. As you know, I like honey kind of a lot. And the variety of bees and the varieties of honeys, depending on what kind of flowers and where the flowers are in the world, are so varied. That's, I don't know, I take like delight in different honeys. And, you know, no bees, no honey. And even Albert Einstein said, and we have to think about this seriously, if the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then humans would have only 4 years of life left. 4 years, no bees. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more humans. That's kind of shocking, isn't it? No bees. No bees, no humans. And His Holiness often, so often refers to the collaboration, to the cooperativeness, to the way that bee societies support, you know, the whole society as a whole. And he said, I'm often moved by the examples of small insects, such as bees. The laws of nature dictate that bees work together in order to survive. As a result, they possess an instinctive sense of social responsibility. And there's even a couple of paragraphs in Volume 1 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion where he and Venerable Children are talking about survival of the most cooperative, citing bee colonies as you know, an example of beings that are so focused towards the good of the whole, that that's where their energy goes. But I always have at the back of my mind, this is my cynical mind, that says yes, and they are biologically programmed to behave that way. That as soon as you appropriate, not through any choice of your own, bee aggregates, you get this bee instinct. So yes, it's a great example, but as human beings, it's really hard for us to do. So I haven't pushed it aside, but I think it's a good example to think about, and I have to look at my own little snarky response. And sometimes I look at bees and other small insects, and I just try to imagine, how does something that small actually have mind? Like, it's trying to disconnect from myself, although I know, and I totally agree, that brain and mind are different phenomena. Brain is physical, mind is not. You don't need a specific size body in order to have a mind. But if you think about the size of a bee brain, I mean, I can't even imagine how big is a bee brain. And then there's a person there, right? So I do think about bees a lot. And so when I saw this story on the NPR News, it's been about 2 years ago now, I was really taken with this headline where this researchers in the UK had discovered that bees intentionally play. They set up this system whereby they were tracking the bumblebees. These were bumblebees they were studying. The bees would go from their nest to their food source, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then the scientists set up this little system where they had a side, they could make a side trip where they were set up with these balls about this big. The balls were as big as the bees were. And the bees could choose, if they wished, on that flight from food to nest, to take a little detour and stop and play with the balls for a while. And they did. They get up, they roll in. The video is so cute. The bee is on top of this ball that's as big as it is, and it rolls back, and they do it for a little while, and then they go back on their regular route. And they've noticed things like younger bees are more inclined to do it than older bees. Younger bees seem to have more fun doing it than the older bees. That there's this whole play thing going on. And what they've learned too, it's too detailed to talk about how they set these experiments up, but that bees can actually count. Like if there are landmarks, for honeybees in this case, if there are landmarks between the food source and the hive, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 markers between those two, then if they change the number of markers between those two sites, the bees will correspondingly not fly far enough or will fly too far until they adapt to the fact that there are new landmarks. There's a new distance. So they're assuming that bees are counting. So this is amazing. When we think about, we talk about all sentient beings and all sentient beings having the Buddha potential and so forth. I don't know, I don't particularly think about insects. And I don't remember whose book it was. It was Philip Glass in an interview was talking about how astonishing it was for him to watch His Holiness watch an insect walk along the windowsill and weep out of his great compassion for this insect, knowing that it was trapped in an insect body. And Philip Glass just looks at the camera. I don't remember what video this was, but he looks at the camera and he says, "Can you imagine weeping at insects?" That's the level of His Holiness's compassion. But that's understanding that these beings really do have this capacity. What the scientist says, this is Queen Mary University of London. Lars Chitika is the professor who was behind this study. She says there are lots of animals who play just for the purposes of enjoyment. Right? We know that. Cats do, dogs do, we play with them. But most examples come from young mammals and birds. This research provides a strong indication that insect minds are far more sophisticated than we might imagine. That insects are people too, which the Dharma teaches us, but our education does not. So there's a little gap. And, I'm always claimed, I'm a city girl, and I'm also an extrovert. And as a city girl, I loved walking through neighborhoods, like at dinner time and stuff, and just seeing people come home from work, and the kids out in the yard, and smelling their dinner. And someone once said I was more like a dog walking through the neighborhood, sniffing out what people were eating. So that was a previous life. But it was a somehow very satisfying connection with humanity that was uplifting. I appreciated it very much. And it's something I've really missed here. Being here at the Abbey all these many years, there's that part of me that misses the connection with people en masse. I don't want to be going to concerts and big gatherings, but just this kind of connection with large groups of people. And Venerable has said before, we have these animals around us. And I'm like, yeah, they're not people. But slowly, I'm coming to recognize that they very much are people. And to think about these little bees stopping to play and roll those little wooden balls at their play station between, taking a break from their very, very work-oriented lives, makes me get over my arrogance of being human and to open my mind a lot to what I think it is to be a sentient being. I'm very stuck in a human mind, human mold. And although it's easy, the turkeys we have are the best example, I think, or the most vivid example. They have different personalities, they have different things they do, they have different seasons, and it's lovely to do mantra with the turkeys or with the deer. but to start developing or really capitalizing on true affection for the bees, will be back soon. Or, I mean, how many of us have not come to really tenderly love the stink bugs that die in your hands or in front of you in the meditation hall? Or, you know, the flies we used to watch die. Not so many this year. Somebody finally plugged up the meditation hall such that the flies aren't in there as much. But for me, I think this kind of tenderness around, oh, the bees play. If bees play, then bees have relationships. If bees have relationships, then they too suffer loss. If they suffer from loss, they too are clinging to that which is permanent. If they're, you know, looking for those balls, they're looking for pleasure in that which is by nature dukkha. They have the same problems I do. And why can't I soften my arrogant mind and really understand that the compassion that I'm hoping to develop is much, much, much broader than my kind of very human view of the world. So I can think about if they develop the strength of their exertion, and even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find, why wouldn't I want to be the one to lead them? Why not me? So anyway, as spring is coming and the bees are coming back, may we rejoice in the opportunity to get to know all kinds of sentient beings and hold them within our bodhicitta.